So I'll call the planning commission meeting to order and ask Jenna to do the roll call and the declaration of person.
One more moment for me. I'm going live on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Chair Mueller. Let's see here. We'll start with the roll. Commissioners Tanda,
Here.
Chair Mueller,
Here.
Commissioners Habib,
Here.
Downey,
Here.
Lake,
Here.
Wilson,
Here.
and Kumar has an excused absence. If I may also declare the posting of the agenda.
Yes.
Tonight's meeting agenda was duly posted, noticed and posted in accordance with Government Code Section 54954.2.
Okay, thank you. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Habib, can you lead us, please?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now is the time for open public comment. Members of the public are entitled to address the planning commission concerning any item within the Morgan Hill Planning Commission's subject matter jurisdiction. Public comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes, except for certain specific exceptions. The commission is prohibited from discussing or taking action on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. Jenna, could you tell everybody how to make comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair Mueller. If you're joining us today using Zoom and wish to provide public comment, you may do so by using the raise hand feature. If you're calling and using your phone, you use the raise hand feature by dialing *9 and then dialing *6. You may also provide public comments to us by emailing us at pleasesee publiccomment@morganhill.ca.gov. Each speaker will receive 3 minutes. If you wish to speak on the behalf of someone else, you will receive 1 additional minute per speaker. If you are speaking on the behalf of 4 or more people, your comments will be limited to a total of 7 minutes. Please make sure to state each person's name for the record. Thank you.
Okay, orders of the day. Does it all go? Okay, we'll move on then. Minutes approval for the February 14th meeting. Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, there are no public hearings, so we're going on to other business. General plan and housing element annual progress reports. Adam, are you going to do the presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Just waiting for the screen to switch. So the item for comment or other discussion is general plan and housing element annual progress report for 2022. So pursuant to Government Code Section 65-400, the state requires most cities and all counties in California to submit an annual progress report or an APR on the status and progress of their general plan implementation to their legislative bodies, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and HCD by April 1st of each year. As you know, the city's comprehensive general plan update was adopted by the City Council in 2016, and the 5th cycle housing element was adopted in February 2015. This APR serves almost as a closing report for the 5th cycle and the start of the 6th cycle for the housing element. Aside from the HCD spreadsheet forms, which are linked to the staff report, there is no standardized format for the preparation of an annual progress report. So jurisdictions are free to come up with whatever format works best for them. So for this reporting period, we are using the list of city accomplishments for 2022 that was presented to the City Council at the annual goal setting workshop in January as our list of the city's general plan implementation highlights for 2022. In our APR, the highlights are organized by general plan element, then by development or department or division, with references to specific general plan goals. OPR, the Office of Planning and Research, also suggests keeping a list of all general plan amendments proposed and will process during each reporting year. And for 2022, we did not have any general plan amendments, or at least any new general plan amendments that we processed or received. And that is also identified in our APR. So this year we added some additional information that we didn't have in previous years. And this is to show how the city has built out its general plan. The table on this slide shows the net growth of Morgan Hill from the 2015 base year of the general plan through June 30th, 2022, as well as the total horizon year projection and the total full build out of the general plan. I want to note that the horizon year projection is based on an estimate of the amount of development that would occur by 2035 as evaluated in the Morgan Hill 2035 general plan EIR. As indicated in the table, Morgan Hill has seen faster growth within the industrial sector and slower growth within the retail and service, as well as the office sectors that are more than expected within the Morgan Hill 2035 general plan EIR. However, all the sectors are well below the total full build out of the general plan, and we're on track of following our general plan. This is one of the spreadsheet tables that HCD requires, and probably the one that most people are familiar with. This is table B within the annual progress report. And this table shows the city's regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, by income level, and how the city has done in terms of creating those units each year of our current housing element cycle, or for the fifth cycle. So it's going back from 2015 through 2023. And just as a reminder, the fifth cycle ends on January 31st, 2023. And so we adopted our sixth cycle housing element in January 25th of 2023. So as indicated on this table, the city has met all the designated RHNA allocation for all categories, and we'll be able to carry some of these numbers into our sixth cycle as well.
Adam, is the goal, that column that says RHNA, is that the goal? And then the far right, the second from the far right is the result?
Correct. So the RHNA allocation column, the 273 for very low, 154 for low, 185 for moderate, and 316 for above moderate. Those were our allocations from the state on how many units we have to provide for each category, for each income level category. And then that second to last column, total units, that's how many entitlements were received for those same units. So we've exceeded every single category. Up until last year, we were doing well, except for the very low column where we're about, was it maybe a couple hundred, or between 100 and 150 units off.
Adam, so what happened there? Because I remember we got a readout, maybe it was a year or more ago, and that very low was a kind of a yellow area where we were not meeting. So we just had a big injection last year. Is that where that 225 came from?
Yes, within the past 6 months.
In 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Can you go back? Was that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Can you go back once, this one? So your projections for 2035 there, right? If you look from 2015 to 2022, which is what, 7 years? If you look at retail, office specifically, even industrial, but it's definitely retail and office, like probably single digit percentages increases, right? And now we're saying for 2035, they're going to jump 30%. And in the case of office, going to jump 60%.
So
Why do we think that?
So the total horizon year projection is what was projected in 2015 through the general plan and through the general plan EIR.
The general plan said we would be at 1.15 million office.
Correct.
We're at 525. What do we think we're going to be at? Or we don't have to project that. Indicating that we're like half of where we thought we were going to be.
Correct. Well, we don't have any projections right now. We're just showing where we were 6 months ago from the data that we had back then. So this is just showing that we're not exceeding what our total horizon or even the full projected build out of the entire general plan. As part of the general plan, it identified what that horizon year total was. And that was the goal. But with SB 330, especially for housing projects, it's limits those caps. And so there's no more population cap or anything like that, or even for like with the RDCS, with that going away, we don't have that threshold anymore. But even though with our total full build out projection, we show that we're not going to meet that anyway. As you can see how far off just within the past 7 years, how much we've grown in each category, and we're developing additional information that we could probably share in the future on where those build outs would be, how many years out that full build out would be.
But it's not particularly good, right?
But this table is really just a snapshot. And with the exception of the existing development as of June 30th, 2022, all of this information comes directly out of the EIR for the general plan. And we consolidated some of the use rows to better align with the congestion management program reports that we submit to VTA, which is what we use to determine what's been built every year, what's been approved, not built, approved every year since we adopted the general plan.
And so just so I understand more, it's more of an educational question. Why do we include all the knowledge, like the annual report seems to primarily focus on RENA, but it is looking at all the other categories too? I mean, you're supposed to report out everything?
You can, there are no guidelines for the general plan side of the progress report, except to note where you change things as far as amendments, you really have a chance to make it your own. The housing side, however, has become more and more prescriptive. This year, they've added so many new things that they want us to track, that there was actually a 2-hour training session for people to attend to learn how to fill out the form. And it's gotten more and more complicated every year. 2 hours, right? Or wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
He said 2 hours of my life I never get back.
Not just Adam, our housing team also goes through it because they prep a lot of the housing side.
I guess, again, remember, I'm just making a comment in that when you're 50% of where you thought you should be, or was expected to be, I'm not sure that in the case of retail and office, I'm not sure it's a good thing. Is it?
I think it's really where, folks thought that retail and service would take off. And what ended up taking off was industrial. And when you do a general plan and you have projections like this, they're just that, a projection.
Okay.
And with long range plans, you do run that risk at the moment it's printed, it's out of date. Just kind of how it works.
Hmm.
You want to add anything to that? Or did I just dump all over it? Okay.
Okay,
Well, and I just wanted to add, we put this together because we've had not a lot, but some public comment about we're overbuilding. We're way beyond the thresholds that were imagined in the general plan. And so we were asked to really take a look at that. And so we were able to put this together using some of the data that we have. It's not perfect, it's just a snapshot. One thing that was pointed out was the population note in the horizon year. That is what is in the EIR. However, there's a policy that's been suspended, but it's still a policy in the general plan that says the year 2035 population should be 58,200.
Hmm.
And then corresponding with residential units and how that would work. So just wanted to clarify. There's in the report that we presented to council during the goal setting, this table's in that with a bunch of footnotes explaining where we got the data and all the different things. So just wanted to clarify that for y'all.
And even on the residential, right, where there's always a lot of consternation around we're building way too much residential, we're saying we projected 22,400 by 2035, but at the rate we're growing between 15 and 22, that's only like 10%, right? In 7 years, sorry. So in 11 years, we'd have to really increase on an annual basis to exceed that number. right? We'd have to see significant increase in residential building, wouldn't we?
Even with the increases, we think we're tracking well. We did some big math. It's kind of like running from, even our population numbers, we get a number from DOF, the Department of Finance, every year. We also generated a number based on the number of residential units that have been approved, the coefficient of the number of people in each unit. And we have two different populations. So you see the 45,000, you see the 47,000, and then there's even another one that is 46,000. So off of those numbers, we are tracking very well for the general plan population that was planned in 2035. And we're well outside of where build out would be, which was a really great thing to see. And we're assuming a 5%, not a 2%. So.
Yeah, the only question is if you use only residents per unit, then you're missing what can be a significant component that's in the DOF report. And that's the net migration in and out of Morgan Hill and the birth and deaths.
Right. But we're also trying to stay very conservative with our numbers. So it'll always look like we're going to get there faster than we actually will.
Okay.
But you are exactly right. And not just birth and death, but net migration. We've actually lost.
Or added together
Right.
into let's say a natural growth rate that doesn't necessarily require building a house to get into it. It just shows up. Right?
And what we're seeing in town, even though DOF says 2.93 per household or per unit, there's an awful lot of 1 and 2s all over town. So where that balances out, you also have the 10s and the 12s and the multi-generational families. So.
So do you have, okay, so you know what the projection looks like going out. Let me ask the other question. This was done just prior to the transition to vehicle miles traveled?
The general plan?
Yeah.
A couple years, perhaps, before the transition.
Right. So, but if we had to do some environmental work based on the growth, it's all going to be vehicle miles traveled.
Right.
As opposed to, if you read this document, it's the old methodology.
We still do both. So there are threshold, we have guidelines for transportation analysis for projects that come from a policy in the general plan. And there are certain thresholds that kick off an LOS, or level of service study for a project. It's gotten a little confusing because of the switch to VMT. So in some cases, like Cochrane Commons, we'll separate those out. So people know this is CEQA, this is general plan. In some cases, like an application that you will see coming to you probably in the next few months, they're combined and it can make it a little confusing. But we are required to look at that in accordance with the general plan.
Right, and we can put mitigation measures in like we did with Cochrane Commons if the level of service study indicates that there's a change required.
Correct, except in Cochrane Commons case, the mitigations were on VMT. And actually, no, you're right, the one mitigation, correct.
That came off the level of service.
Right.
But you have to put it in the approval conditions because the CEQA mitigations will not show it. Right? The reports we get will have it, but we got to do it. In that case, I think it's split between two projects in it.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, were you going to just ask each of the commissioners if they had questions? That may be better because we're really not trying to reach any decision.
Right. Commissioner Habib, any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Liam, do you have more or you're good? You're good, Wayne?
I had a few.
Oh,
Using that as kind of a basis and starting with residential units, I see that we had projected about on the average each year, 370 new residential units being approved. And the facts are, we actually almost get right on the nose with 350. Although it was a very circuitous route that we took indeed. During the COVID, we had a 1 year that had about 100 units, I think, approved or built. And last year it was 1,960 or so. So I'm just wondering, my first question has to do with for the past almost year, from April of last year to April of this year, how many units are we counting this year?
I think I'll bring up this. Sure.
In other words, for the year 2023, would that number be about 1,000?
It's a calendar year count, so not April to April. We start prepping this report in January.
Okay, so this is a calendar year? Yeah. Okay, for the calendar year. Okay, well, that's. Even for the calendar year, based upon what we've seen so far, do we see another banner year like the previous year, or is it going to take another big dip?
It's not going to be as large as this one because with the 2022, a lot of this was applications that came in right when COVID started, right before COVID, and so it was really pent up. It was just it just got pushed out, and they all just happened to be approved around the same time in 2022, and so I don't see it in the next couple of years being this high. I don't know how the numbers. I didn't look at the numbers for 2023 for the past couple months to see what that is. But for applications that we received, it's not as nearly as high as they were for last year during this time. They're in the same 3 months.
Okay, when we,
January through March.
the unit that we're using, Adam, is that permitted units issued? Those are building permits?
Correct.
Yes.
Now, we do have the ability to shift some of them into 2023.
Mhm.
For the purposes of the housing element, for the purposes of the SB 35 qualification. And so we likely will end up doing that because we want to get to those numbers faster. So we can get off the list for SB 35.
Right.
I think my takeaway from this is that it was amazing that we actually stayed right on course for what we had projected 7 years ago, pat on the back. But some of it was hard work and determination. Others were kind of luck. And it would be to really closely monitor what's going to be happening in the next couple of years, because with an unconstrained building process, if you will, not a building process, but an approval of permits, we could see a lot more development than the 370 that we had projected. And we'll see during 2023 and maybe even become clearer in 2024, because I think the economy is going to be taking care of some of this as well. The second question I had to do with the one called moderate housing. A few are deed restricted and the rest are non-deed restricted. Could you explain why that's the case?
Sure. So the non-deed restricted is really projects within the past couple of years or several years is from the inclusionary housing ordinance. So those aren't deed restricted, but I don't have the information for the deed restricted ones. That's really from a housing division. I'm not sure which projects those are, but usually with the deed restricted, it would be a combination of the very low, and moderate projects. So there's some applications that break down there where they have 50% of the units are very low, maybe 30 something for low, and then the remainder for moderate. And so that's where some of those are deed restricted. It's some that are 100% affordable projects where they have varying numbers between those three income levels.
One thing that we're finding is because the median income is so high in Santa Clara County, that moderate is actually market here in Morgan Hill. And so when the moderates come into play, if it's 100% market project, but they can say that some of them are moderate, that's where the non-deed restricted units come from. But if they're part of an overall project, then we will go ahead and deed restrict as well.
The other part of it is our market rate apartments, especially
Correct.
hit moderate rate.
Yeah.
All right.
That makes up a lot of the numbers.
The next one is on the next slide, I believe. It's the one that showed our progress. There you go. And I want to focus in on the four bottom ones. On retail and services, it was earlier noted that we made very little progress there, but no surprise to anybody on the commission. We knew that even before 2015. It's just reflecting the reality of the marketplace. And the question will be, well, what do we do with all that land? Do we continue to preserve it for future generations, for possible retail service, or do we look at it for some other reason? And I think that's a big planning question. Those square footage of 1 million square feet, maybe we'll use 10% of that for future retail. I don't know, but that's a big planning question. What do you do with it? And I know we see that almost once a month or so. Something comes up. The next one is office, and that's very interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that, but I have a future in-law who builds office spaces in the Bay Area and has their office in San Francisco. And he told me, he shared with me saying, this is terrible. This is the worst they've ever seen. They almost hope for an earthquake so that they could rebuild things, because he told me that there's over a 30% vacancy in office space in San Francisco. And if that's the case in San Francisco, it reverberates throughout the Bay Area. And we see all the things happening with, the startups, et cetera. But the question there is this just a blip, or is this a trend that given that people will work at home, that others will leave to other parts of the state or other states? Is that something that we maybe could or should be taking a look at as well? The third one is industrial, and I would like to add my praise for city staff and your participation in doing that. If anything, that was the one that I thought we would be far deficient in, and in fact, we're right on track. That's fantastic, and congratulations to you all on that. The last comment I had was on public facilities. And so we're really short on public facilities. And my question is, what is that? Are those parks maybe? Or what are the public facilities that aren't materializing at the rate that we thought that they would?
It's parks and community centers and other
Government offices.
government offices.
Okay. Well, and the question on that would be, wouldn't it be nice we had a benefactor who would say, the overages, the leftovers for retail and office and others that aren't going to develop, let's turn those into parks and community facilities, and I'll donate to make that happen. I'm not saying turn those into residential units, but it would be great if we just had even more space for people.
Called Santa.
If that,
Wayne's gonna be the first. That person is called Santa.
I'm sorry, what, Paul?
That person is called Santa.
Santa Claus, okay. Yeah, well, and the last question I had to do with all that's occurring, we're about 30% of where we thought we would be when the plan was approved in 2015 in years, and in some of the areas, residential and industrial. How are we doing in the area of things that also matter to the public? And that would be the various levels of public services and the needs in terms of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, in other words, streets to a large extent, or signal timing, but also public safety, police and fire, water, sewage, and public open space. It seems like we should be about 30% of where we want to be in the year 2035. Where are we there? And I know we're going to be doing some of that. You remind me every time I bring it up on transportation, we'll have a plan just for that purpose. But in the other areas, is there some way or maybe you know, like we're doing really well in this and this and this is a concern, or can you speak about that?
Well, as far as infrastructure goes, aside from transportation, it's tied to build out. And so what we have now is supposed to support us until build out. And we have the master plans, the infrastructure master plans are all available online, sewer, water, et cetera. And that has always been the goal. So when we did get some public comment about how do you not know where you are right now, this moment in time, it's because we're tied to the build out. And so that's where it all sits. And even the general plan horizon, we're not even close. So it hasn't been a concern or a worry, at least in that regard, because of where we are. And everybody sort of knows where we are. And I don't know the other on the police side. It's a great question, but I'm not sure how to answer that this evening.
I was just wondering, maybe for next year, in our next annual report, you had this great information, and you also had where we're at in terms of our public services and our infrastructure. And it would be able to provide information that can frame a policy discussion about, well, how are we going to fund it? Or do we, take some other course? My experience in the Bay Area has been, of the past 50 years, in terms of traffic, we really want to achieve a certain level of mobility, levels of service. And when we can't do it, we finally realize that's impossible because of the way we move and because of the number of people, the number of jobs. We change how we measure things. VMT is a prime example. You go from level of service to VMT because the realization is at the level of service. You cannot achieve the levels of service, which used to be D, then E. And when I was down in Stanford, LA, we had levels of service F, F1 and F2 and F3. And it was like, what are those? Well, those would be the theoretical, which we actually achieve every day. We have that much congestion. So you move how you measure things. And yet people keep moving here. So I guess it's acceptable, by one measure, everybody complains, but people still move here, or at least they used to. So if we could have sort of that information, at least for our little Morgan Hill, which is not the Bay Area, but Morgan Hill, what's happening here, that'd be great. Yeah, so if next year there was something about that, about our progress toward our goals for levels of service in all of our public areas, that'd be fantastic.
Our goals for level of service are in the general plan.
What do you mean for all of our facilities?
Yes.
For water
No, for level of service in the traffic.
and traffic?
In the traffic portion, there's level of service at all the major intersections in the general plan. It sets what the level of service is. And they're lower than most people think they are.
Yeah, and that would be if we could report that and how we're moving toward that. But the facts are, that those levels of service on the city streets get terribly impacted by the overflow from the true arterials, the freeway. And to the extent the freeway traffic pushes over, there's not that much a city can do other than focusing it on one street or another, but the traffic's going through. And for everybody to know and that's not a Morgan Hill problem, that's the Bay Area. That's actually folks to the south. And our solution maybe would be to encourage all the jobs to locate south of Gilroy and don't have them come through Morgan Hill if that's what we're after,
That's your second phone call to Santa, right? Yeah.
That's been my theory all along, that rather than have a high-speed rail coming into the Bay Area, you just put the jobs in Fresno.
There you go.
Make them happy as well.
Problem solved.
I guess there's a couple other things that I know about. And that is, I know we're adding police officers.
Yes.
And the third Morgan Hill Fire Station is going to be built. And as I recall, what I heard is we already know how to pay for all the staffing,
Correct.
which is the big nut.
That'd be great to have in a report like this, show the progress for everybody.
And we'll put it on the list for next year. Absolutely. I did want to address the office to housing that you were mentioning in your, I think, second point. There is a new housing bill. It's just been introduced. AB 1532 would allow for streamlined conversion of office to housing, provided a certain level of affordability is included. And it's not something we need to worry about here. San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, if it does pass, a lot of people will take advantage of it, I'm sure.
Okay, go back to the arena number side. What I think would be helpful here was the second half of 2022, those numbers are countable in the next housing cycle. I think it was a July 1.
Right.
Okay, so it would be nice to sort of tell how much of those we think we might be able to count in the next cycle as information to the council. And the other part of this is this does not include extremely low, right? Is this the last year that we don't have to report that?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So I think that would really be helpful since we know there's the way this reads, we met everything, right? And there is a chance that 6 month, 5 month period where we can use whatever numbers are appropriate that we don't need for the last housing cycle. That is a bank going forward. And I think that's a key piece of information because it shows how we're getting started.
Mhm.
And that would help, city council understand potentially where we're at. And the fact that we're going to meet everything for cycle 5 is really good news. Commissioner Lake,
No, I'm good.
you're good?
Good.
Okay, your turn. If you have questions.
I had the same questions Wayne did, so they were answered about the office and the retail.
Okay. And I just asked the ones I think I needed.
So we do have a question from the public that just came in, the PC public comment.
Okay.
Does the city expect new residential construction to consist of greenfield development, infill development, upzoning, or a combination of these? And I can answer, and Adam can add on. We are not planning any upzoning as part of our housing element. It's not necessary. All of our housing is moving forward based on our existing zoning. We do have some greenfield development and some infill development. So that is the combination, but upzoning is not part of it. Thank you for your comment.
Yes. And the email system works. So let's open public comment officially. And we've just answered the first one. Do we have any other questions? Any other raised hands? And you might remind people how to do it.
Thank you, Chair Mueller. I don't see any raised hands, but if you'd like to send us a public comment, feel free to come up to the podium, or if you're joining us online, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 and then dialing *6 on your phone.
Or as the last comment that we got was via email.
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. With that, then I will close public comment. The commission has gone around. Is there anything further that you want to talk about? Okay, there's no action required on this. Right?
Mhm.
So I think we're done with this item and we'll go to director's report.
Thank you. So our next meeting is on the 28th. And we do have 2 items for that meeting. We have 2 gas stations in town that are redeveloping, still remaining in the same use, but doing a full-blown update, and in one case relocating, reorienting some of the buildings on site. So both of those will be coming to you for review on the 28th.
And
I may not be here, just so you know.
I'm sorry?
I may not make the 28th.
Jennifer, are we changing the time? I know the mayor mentioned something about that.
So that is something I'm going to also put on the agenda for discussion.
Okay, for March 28th.
March 28th, yes. So council did vote to move their meetings to start at 6 p.m. effective April 19th. So,
A follow-up to your comment about two major remodels of gas stations.
Mhm.
Is the city seeing anybody have an interest in putting in additional electric charging stations?
yes. And we were approached by one entity interested in doing a new fueling facility, but also having it ready to retrofit to entirely all electric charging. They wanted to go in a location where they weren't allowed due to the plan development or the PD. But that was a very interesting idea, and I'm not sure. I don't want to speak to these two facilities, whether or not they're planning that as well, to some extent, but everyone is looking at that. So if I could figure out a way to charge a car while it's parked, like we can lay down our phones and have them charged, I'd be a billionaire, but I haven't figured that one out yet. I'm sure someone's working on it.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's coming.
I bet. So
Yeah.
we just need the infrastructure in the street. So,
New battery technology
right,
can literally charge in minutes now, not.
that's true.
Anything else?
Not at this time.
Okay. With that, I will close or adjourn this planning commission meeting.